The black void of space stretched endlessly beyond the bridge windows, interrupted only by the pale shimmer of distant stars and the blood-red glow of Arc Sector 5. Commander Dren Hale stood motionless at the helm of the Harrow, Earth's last-generation dreadnought. His jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the holographic display hovering above the console. Behind him, silence. Not even the low murmurs of officers dared to disrupt the tension wrapped around the room like a noose. The alien fleet was waiting, 42 vessels of varying size, shape, and intent. They had the numbers. They had the arrogance. But they didn't fire. Not yet. Because they saw her. The Harrow didn't look like anything in their archives. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't pretty. It was an old beast, a floating cathedral of scarred armor and blunt defiance, like a warhammer in a sea of daggers. It didn't shine like their sleek cruisers. It didn't emit welcome codes. It didn't send warnings. It simply arrived, quiet, unbothered, watching. "Sir," Lieutenant Cray said behind him, his voice tight. "They're scanning us. Again." Dren didn't answer. He didn't need to. Let them scan. Let them search for systems they wouldn't recognize. Let them guess. That's what humans had become experts at, being underestimated. The Harrow was retired once, deemed too aggressive in design. A relic of old Earth war doctrine. That was before the First Contact massacre. Before humanity learned just how unprepared the Galactic Council was to meet a species bred by war, betrayal, and survival instinct. When diplomacy failed, when negotiation broke down, humans didn't appeal. They retaliated. The Harrow was brought back from the scrapyard. No upgrades, no improvements, just a message. We remember what it means to be feared. "Commander, we are receiving a tight beam signal," said Comms Officer Vell. "It's garbled, but I think they're asking for our terms?" Dren smirked. "Our terms? They hadn't even fired a shot." "Show me their flagship," he said. The hologram shifted, zooming in on the lead ship, a shimmering Arc-class cruiser shaped like a crescent blade. Thousands aboard, bristling with weapons, tech more advanced than anything Earth could replicate. But none of it mattered, not anymore, because Earth had stopped trying to match them in technology. Now they beat them with terror. "Power weapons?" Cray asked. Dren shook his head. "Number let them sweat." He turned and walked to the center of the bridge. Every step echoed like a hammer strike in the tense silence. His officers watched him, not out of fear, but faith. Dren wasn't a genius, or a prodigy, or a politician in uniform. He was a soldier, the last of the old guard. He'd bled in the Martian uprisings, lost a brother in the Titan blockade. He wasn't interested in glory, only vengeance. Outside the ship, the standoff stretched for another minute, then another. Then the alien flagship began to turn. "They're retreating," Vell whispered. "All of them. They're leaving orbit." The bridge erupted, not with cheers but with quiet disbelief. No shots fired, no damage, just presence, just fear. Dren didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just watched the display as the alien ships shrank into the void, one by one, until the last signal blinked out. "Broadcast one message to them," he said. "Yes, sir. What do you want to send?" Dren leaned forward. "Just coordinates." Vell blinked. "Coordinates, sir?" "Earth's defense grid. Let them stare at it for a while." He turned his back on the console and walked off the bridge, not waiting for the reactions. He didn't need to see the faces. He knew what they felt. Not pride, not power, just the cold satisfaction of being feared. Humanity didn't need to shoot anymore. All they had to do was show up. The silence in Dren Hale's quarters wasn't peace. It was pressure, the kind that crept into your bones and whispered that something had gone too smoothly. He sat on the edge of the hardened steel cot, unlatching the brace around his knee. Old injury, shrapnel. The kind of wound the medtechs could have replaced outright, but Dreen refused synthetics. He wanted to feel the pain, to remember. The Harrow had sent an entire alien battle group into full retreat without a single shot fired, not a dent in the hull, not a tremor on the deck. But Dren knew better. He'd seen what came after fear, retaliation. The aliens wouldn't let this go, not forever, not without a show of force. Because if there was one thing the Galactic Order couldn't afford, it was the idea that humans, violent, chaotic, and inferior, could win a war just by standing tall. There would be consequences. "Bridge to Commander." A voice cracked through the comms. "Message received from Fleet Command, encrypted eyes only." Dren groaned and pulled the brace off fully, letting it clatter onto the floor before hobbling to the terminal. "Patch it through here." The screen flickered. Then the cold face of Admiral Rawkin appeared, former politician turned warlord in a pressed uniform, eyes like dead glass. "Commander Hale, congratulations on today's outcome." The way he said it twisted in Dren's gut. "Your stunt got the Council's attention. They've labeled the incident at Arc Sector 5 as a violation of interstellar conduct." Dren didn't flinch. "We didn't fire. We didn't even speak." "That's the problem," Rawkin growled. "You didn't act like a species desperate for diplomacy. You acted like a predator." Dren leaned forward. "Then maybe they'll stop trying to cage us like animals." Silence. Then Rawkin's voice dropped. "They've dispatched a diplomatic fleet. You're to remain in the sector. Do not provoke. Do not advance. Do nothing unless fired upon. That clear?" Dren exhaled through his nose. Crystal. The screen blinked off. He stood there for a moment, staring at his own reflection. Greying hair. A scar that carved down from brow to cheek. He looked more machine than man. But every scar, every line, earned, not gifted, not bred. Earned. There was a knock at his door, not standard, sharp, intentional. "Enter." Cray stepped in, stiff-backed. "Sir, you need to see something." Dren followed him back up to the bridge, every step up the grated corridor reminding his knee that it hated him. When the blast doors opened, the air on the bridge had shifted. Nervous energy. Something unscripted. Cray pulled up the holo display. "We picked up new movement near the asteroid field. Not alien. Human dot." Dren frowned. No ships were scheduled to jump in. "That's the thing, sir. It's not a fleet. It's one ship. Civilian registry, no official flight plan, but..." "But what?" Cray rotated the display. The ship wasn't military. It wasn't large, but it was old. Ancient by spacefaring standards. Its hull was patched with mismatched metal. Its thrusters spat irregular ion trails, and its ID tag came from a place most officers in the room had only read about in old Earth reports. "Is that from Earth?" Vel whispered. Cray nodded. "Not just Earth. Old Earth. Pre-unification. It's a survival-class deep ranger. No AI, no navlink. Fully manual." "Someone brought that out here?" Dren asked, voice low. "We don't think it came by choice." As if on cue, the room's lights flickered. A ping echoed across the bridge. "Commander!" Vel said, her voice shaking now. "We're getting a distress signal. From the civilian ship." Dren's heart rate ticked up. He hadn't heard that sound in years, the raw analog panic of an old Earth beacon. "Patch it through." Static crackled. Then a voice, weak, broken, but human. They took the others. "Please." Anyone out there, please, don't let them take me too. Dren's jaw clenched. They hadn't retreated. They'd baited. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The bridge held its breath as the last words of the distress signal faded into static. Don't let them take me too. Dren stared at the display, his hand tightening around the edge of the console. That voice, young, frightened, and definitely human, cut through the walls he'd spent years building. Not because of what it said, but how it sounded. It was real. Not data. Not a log. Not post-battle cleanup. A living person out there, in an ancient coffin of a ship, surrounded by gods knew what, begging for help. Cray, Dren said coldly. Status of that ship? Cray didn't hesitate. Minimal life support, no shields, hull integrity failing. They're stuck in the gravity pull of an asteroid cluster, drifting hard. If we don't get someone out there in 20 minutes, they won't survive the impact. Vel's hands danced over the console. Still no sign of hostile movement, but I don't buy it. That sector was cleaned 30 minutes ago. This wasn't an accident. Dren nodded. It's bait. Cray's voice dropped. What kind of aliens would use a civilian for bait? Dren gave him a long look. The kind that finally figured out we value our own. A moment of silence followed. Every officer on that bridge understood the game had changed. It wasn't about battleships anymore, it was about leverage. And they just found the softest spot in the human war machine, its people. I'm going out there, Dren said. Heads turned. Cray stepped forward, confused. Sir, with respect, we have drones. We've got recovery pilots. They'll hesitate. Dren cut him off. They'll see the trap and wait for orders. They'll calculate loss and odds. I don't have time for that. You're injured. Then I'll limp faster. Vel stood. Commander, you haven't flown an EVA sortie in 5 years. Then let's see if I've still got the muscle memory. The bridge didn't argue after that. When Dren made a call, he didn't ask permission. And when someone out there was screaming into the black, Dren Hale wasn't the kind of man who sat back and hoped someone else would answer. The EVA pod was barely larger than a coffin, bolted with stripped-down systems and no room for second chances. It fit him like an iron shell, pressurizing with a wheeze and locking tight. The launch deck's red lights spun slowly as the tube extended, angling him towards the drifting wreck that used to be a civilian survival ship. Vel's voice buzzed in his ear. Telemetry locked. You're clear to launch. Estimated contact time, 6 minutes. Sir, be careful. I won't be polite either. The thrusters engaged with a gut-punch jolt, and the stars streaked as he crossed the void. The asteroid cluster ahead was a swirling death trap, sharp and moving. And in its grip, like a child drowning in a storm drain, was the civilian ship, listing sideways, spinning slow, bleeding air. Dren stabilized his trajectory and let the rest of the system guide him in. This wasn't about finesse. It was speed. The alien signatures began to ping just as he reached the edge of the target. 4 blips, then 8. Small vessels, stealth class. Watching. Measuring his response. He activated the comms. This is Commander Dren Hale of the Harrow. I am retrieving a human from your trap. If you engage, I'll answer. Not with weapons, with consequences. You think because I didn't fire before that I won't now. You don't know me. No reply. Just that awful stillness. Dren latched onto the hull of the wrecked ship, mag boots slamming into place. He cut the outer seal and pulled the emergency override on the airlock. The doors hissed open, barely functioning, half melted from whatever heat weapon had clipped the hull. Inside, it smelled like burnt insulation and panic. And in the corner, under a collapsed panel, was a boy. Maybe 18, pale, breathing shallow. He looked up as Dren stepped in, and his face twisted in disbelief. You're real. Dren crouched. "What's your name?" The boy swallowed hard. "Tanner. Tanner Cole." "You're lucky, Tanner. I'm not a good man, but I hate the people who did this more than I hate myself. Can you walk?" "Yeah, I think. My leg's messed up, but yeah." Dren helped him to his feet. The ship trembled. A distant crunch. Something collided with an asteroid nearby. "They're getting closer," Tanner said. Dren's voice was ice. "Let them." He activated the pod's emergency beacon and engaged extraction boosters. As the EVA pod reeled them back toward the Harrow, the alien ships did nothing. Just watched. Silent, floating witnesses to the one thing they didn't understand. Humans didn't fear death. They ran toward it, especially for one of their own. By the time Dren and Tanner were reeled back into the Harrow's hangar bay, the atmosphere on board had changed. The crew wasn't just alert. They were angry. Not panicked. Not rattled. Angry. That quiet, boiling kind of rage that only built when someone took a shot at their kind and walked away smug. Dren stepped out of the EVA pod first, supporting the boy as he limped beside him. Medical teams swarmed in, but Dren waved them off. "He's alive. Treat him. Quietly." Tanner looked up at him, confused. "Why quietly?" Dren didn't answer. Not directly. He looked toward Cray, who was already on the hangar platform, eyes scanning a tablet. "Damage report?" Dren asked. Cray nodded. "Minimal. They didn't fire. They just watched." Dren's jaw clenched. "That's worse." Cray followed behind as Dren strode toward the command elevator. "Sir, do you think they were probing for weaknesses?" "They weren't probing." Dren stabbed the control panel. "They were taking notes." Back on the bridge, the mood was sharp and clipped. No one smiled. No one asked questions. Everyone had seen the transmission. Everyone heard Tanner's voice, heard the kind of hopelessness that reminded them all why they wore that uniform. "Bring up the stealth ships," Dren ordered. "I want real-time tracking." Vel pulled the data feed from long-range sensors. Still at a distance. Not cloaked, just observing. "They haven't moved since you returned." "Because they're not interested in this ship anymore." Dren's eyes narrowed. "They got what they wanted. Proof." "Proof of what?" "That they can snatch humans from inside our patrol zones and walk away untouched." He turned to the room. "And we let them. We blinked." "But you saved the kid," Vel said. "One." Dren's voice was sharp. "They've likely got dozens more, maybe hundreds, civilians, colonists. Hell, for all we know, they're picking up people from frontier stations and no one's even noticed. And if they figure out that we won't hit back unless we're shot at, they'll never stop." Cray hesitated. "Fleet Command won't authorize a strike, Commander. Not over one ship. Not over a guess." Dren nodded slowly. "Then it's a good thing I'm not asking permission." That brought silence, the kind of silence that came before something irreversible. "Sir," Cray finally said. Dren looked at him dead on. "Prep the drone wings. I want scout coverage over every asteroid in that belt. I want eyes in shadows. I want thermal sweeps. I want noise spikes logged by the second. If even a whisper of alien tech flinches, I want to know before they do." Cray opened his mouth, but Dren wasn't done. "Then I want all weapons primed, shields to combat setting. Tell engineering to reroute secondary power to reactor buffers. We're going to push the drive coils to redline." "Are we jumping out?" "No." Dren cracked his knuckles. "We're jumping in." Cray blinked. "Into the asteroid belt? That's suicide." "Not if we land first." Dren moved toward the star map, hovering at the center of the room. With a few gestures, he marked the outer edges of the field. Then, deeper. There, nestled between spinning debris and blind zones, was a shape. Faint, cold, but unmistakably artificial. "I don't think that civilian ship drifted here. I think it was released, just close enough to lure us, just far enough to slow us down." Vel leaned in. "What is that?" "A base." Dren's voice was iron. "A black site." "Are we sure?" "No." He turned to face them. "But I'm done being sure. I'm done waiting. I've spent too many years watching humans get treated like rodents by species that think our emotions are a weakness. We didn't rise to the stars because we were kind. We made it because we don't give up. Because when you hurt one of ours, just one, we burn your house down to find the rest." No one spoke. He tapped the final coordinates and nodded. "We're going in hot, and if they want a war—" He stared out the bridge window, where the stars trembled like dying candles. "We'll remind them why our kind is feared, even without firing a shot." The jump into the asteroid belt wasn't smooth. It wasn't supposed to be. The Harrow punched into the dense field like a sledgehammer through glass, its hull groaning against gravitational flux and razor-sharp debris. Alarms screamed. Metal screamed louder. Shields flared as kilometer-long chunks of rock grazed the outer plating. But Dren didn't blink. This was the part they never saw coming. Aliens loved their elegant tactics, long-range scans, diplomatic posturing, slow, careful power plays. Humans? They kicked the damn door in. "Shield vector realigned," Cray called out from the console. "Drive coils holding, barely." "Good," Dren said, gripping the edge of the command console. "Keep threading us in deeper. I want our hull brushing stone." Vel looked over from her station, eyes tight with concern. "Commander, if we go any closer, we won't be able to jump out fast. We'll lose line of sight nav for at least 30 seconds. Dren's gaze was hard. "We won't need to jump out." The bridge went quiet again. They were used to this by now. Hale didn't bluff. He didn't posture. When he said he was going into the pit, he meant to claw his way to the bottom and drag something back up with him, or die trying. "Drone swarm deployed," Cray reported. "Thermal scans active. Radiation mapping pinging. Hold on." His voice caught. "We've got heat. Dead center of the belt. Buried under a collapsed rock formation. Camouflaged structure. Metallic density off the charts." Dren's eyes narrowed. "There it is." Vel adjusted the display. "No signal output, no broadcasts, completely silent, but it's powered. Running dark. Which means it's hiding something." Cray looked up. "How do we approach? We can't get a clean lock through the debris, not unless we blow a path." Dren grinned. "Then we blow a path." The first salvo from the Harrow didn't target the enemy. It hit the rocks. Full plasma charges, controlled demolition, carving a tunnel of fire straight toward the camouflaged base. Chunks of asteroid scattered like shattered bones. A shockwave rippled through the cluster. The aliens were no longer watching. They were scrambling. "Enemy movement detected," Vel shouted. 4 stealth-class ships incoming. 2 more on standby. They're flanking." Dren leaned in. "Weapons live. Shields to max. Fire at will." The ship roared. A wave of silent energy crackled across the void as the Harrow unleashed its fury. The aliens had never faced her guns before, only her silence. But now they were learning the difference. One stealth vessel tried to bank hard behind an asteroid. Harrow's rail cannon caught it mid-turn, slicing it in two like a cleaver. Another launched plasma torpedoes. Dren's intercept systems detonated them before they left the launcher. The remaining ships scattered. "Cowards," Dren muttered. "They wanted to pick off civilians. Easy kills, no teeth." "Sir, the base is exposed," Cray said. "We're reading internal life signs. Faint. Dozens, maybe more. Humanoid." That was enough. Dren snapped toward the hangar channel. "Drop strike team. Full loadout. You find prisoners. You get them out. If anything moves and it ain't human, put it in the dirt." He paused. I'm coming with. Cray stepped forward immediately. Commander, with respect, you're the last man who should lead this team. Dren's eyes burned. And I'm the only one who will. The strike shuttle slammed into the alien base like a battering ram. No subtlety, no landing protocol. The airlock blew before it sealed, and the squad moved in under a hail of gunfire. But Dren didn't hide behind his men. He was at the front, plasma rifle in hand, armor scorched, jaw locked. The halls of the base were tight, dark. Flickering lights illuminated bone-white walls and strange alien script. Every corridor twisted like a wormhole, like the base had been grown instead of built. One of the Marines shouted, "Sir, over here!" Dren turned the corner and froze. Cells, glass tanks, humans, dozens of them, men, women, children, all in stasis, all pale, unconscious, wired into something unnatural. Something wrong. Tanner's voice echoed in his mind. They took the others. Dren stepped forward, hands curling into fists. A shadow moved on the other side of the room. An alien, tall insectoid, skin like polished black metal, stood staring at him. Not armed, not aggressive, just watching. You did this? Dren said, his voice low and crackling through the comms. The alien didn't respond, didn't flinch. Dren didn't wait for one. He raised his weapon and pulled the trigger. Smoke clung to the corridors of the alien base like fog in a graveyard. Dren stepped over the twitching remains of the insectoid creature, the barrel of his plasma rifle still glowing red. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Whatever that thing was, scientist, guard, or just another monster, it wasn't going to answer any questions now. Behind him, the strike team fanned out, checking corners, clearing rooms, sweeping for more hostiles. There weren't many. That was the most unsettling part. "Sir," one of the Marines called, voice strained. "You need to see this." Dren moved through a side passage. The chamber was different from the rest. Cold, sanitized. Walls lined with observation ports, like a twisted operating theater. On the far end, a large stasis pod stood upright, unlike the others. Inside, a man floated. Eyes closed, face pale, tubes pumping synthetic fluids into his arms. Dren stepped closer. He recognized the face. "That's Commander Avery," Cray whispered through the comms, voice cracking with disbelief. "He went missing 2 years ago during the Andros patrol sweep. They listed him KIA. Dren's stomach twisted. The Andros incident had been scrubbed. Quiet, swept under by Fleet Command like it never happened. Now here Avery was, alive, preserved like a lab rat." Another Marine shouted from the next chamber over, "Sir, there's more. Not just soldiers, civilians, miners, even off-world kids. They've been harvesting us." Dren's throat tightened. He turned to Vel, who had just arrived, her helmet dripping condensation. "Tell me we've got enough power to thaw them out," he said. Vel's fingers flew across her scanner. "We can start it, but it'll take time. The base's systems are buried in some kind of hybrid tech, half organic. If we unplug them wrong, we could kill them." Dren stared at Avery's motionless form, rage boiling just beneath his skin. "They weren't just capturing humans," he said, voice cold. "They were studying us." "Why?" Cray asked. "What could they possibly want?" Vel looked up, her face pale. "Not what, how?" Dren turned to her. "Explain." Vel hesitated, then held up her scanner. "I've been reading microactivity in their lab systems. Every captive, every pod, they're connected to something bigger. A neural relay, a hive mind?" Cray guessed. "Worse," she said. "A simulation." Dren's eyes darkened. "They were copying us." Vel nodded. "They've been plugging into human thought patterns, emotions, pain responses, survival instincts, feeding our fear, anger, memories into their network. They're trying to learn how we fight, how we think, not just to predict us, to become us." Dren finished. A long silence followed. That was it. That was the answer to the question that had haunted him since the standoff in Arc Sector 5. Why did the alien fleet panic when they saw the Harrow? Because this wasn't the first time they'd seen it. They'd already simulated that battle, and in every version, the humans had won. Badly. That's why they backed down. Because they'd already lost. To human instinct, rage, and defiance. To the very things they thought were our weaknesses. Dren's fists tightened around his rifle. They've been stealing our minds to model their future wars, trying to find a way to beat us before the next conflict even starts. "And?" Cray asked. Dren stared at the glowing pod, holding Avery's barely living form. "They failed." He turned to the squad. "Set demolition charges. Pull the power from these labs. We'll carry who we can. Download everything else. I want their whole experiment wiped from the galaxy." Cray hesitated. "Sir, Fleet Command can shove it," Dren snapped. "This isn't a war for politicians anymore. This is a soul war." The team moved. No more doubts, no more hesitation. Dren stood there for one more moment, hand resting on the pod. Avery's fingers twitched beneath the glass. "You're coming home, old friend?" And then he turned, leaving the dead minds of a failed alien plan to rot in the darkness. As the charges ticked down and the strike team began to evacuate, Dren knew this wasn't the end. This was only the moment humanity stopped being prey. The first explosion came from deep inside the alien base's spinal core, then another, then another. The underground structure began to shudder and collapse, the smooth alien walls groaning as if alive, shrieking under their own dying weight. Lights flickered, circuits fried. Whatever intelligence powered the base was bleeding out through every severed cable and melting node. Dren didn't look back. He carried the weight of a human soldier over his shoulder, one of the civilians they'd found near the last corridor, dehydrated, dazed, barely responsive. Others in the team did the same, lifting limp forms, dragging them through broken stasis chambers and corridors, now drowning in smoke and flame. "Evac shuttle incoming," Cray said over the comm. 2 minutes to pick up. External corridor to the west is still stable, for now. Vel's voice cut in next. "We've got movement outside the perimeter. 3 alien ships closing in. Smaller craft. Not the same class we engaged before." "Different how?" Dren barked as he shoved through the last collapsed tunnel, knees aching, lungs hot. "They're heavier. No stealth pattern. These aren't recon ships, they're hunters." Dren gritted his teeth. "Then they've figured out we didn't just come here to look." The squad broke out of the final chamber just as the floor behind them cracked in half, fire and steam belching through the rift. Dren shoved the limp body up into the loading ramp of the shuttle, grabbed the edge, and hauled himself in. Inside, the medic crews were already working. The rescued were laid out in rows, bodies shaking under thermal blankets, some weeping, others too broken to react. The smell of them, fear, sweat, blood, it was all human. All real. Dren pulled off his helmet, wiping soot from his face. His eyes burned, not from smoke, from clarity. "Pilot!" he snapped. "Get us the hell out of here!" The shuttle roared to life and lifted off. Below, the base collapsed entirely, swallowed in a ball of white flame as the last of the charges went off. Metal tore free like bone snapping. Rock imploded. The entire asteroid cracked in two, but above them, in the black, those new alien ships waited. And they weren't retreating. "Multiple weapons locking on," Cray warned, eyes glued to the sensor feed. "Point defense active. Don't break course," Dren ordered. "Let them know what happens when they stay for the second round." The first hunter ship fired, a beam weapon. Hot, focused, fast. It struck the shuttle's forward shield and splashed harmlessly across the reinforced plating. The shuttle didn't flinch. The Harrow did. She descended like a falling god. Massive, silent, blotting out the stars. Dren watched from the window as his ship, angled her guns down at the hunter fleet. And then she opened fire. The alien ship that had fired was gone in a blink, reduced to drifting debris and vapor. The second ship tried to bank, pulling away. Harrow's forward cannons tracked it, landed a shot straight through its core. Explosion. Gone. The third didn't run. It charged. Dren's expression didn't change. Let it try. The alien vessel zipped forward, sleek, desperate, weapons glowing. It closed the gap between itself and the shuttle fast. Too fast. The shuttle's pilot swerved, defensive systems flaring, but the alien ship had already locked on, until something caught it. Mid-air. The Harrow launched a tractor beam at full power, grabbing the ship mid-dive, yanking it off its path like a wolf snapping a deer's neck mid-leap. The alien ship twisted violently, ripped sideways, its hull buckling under pressure it was never meant to endure. Then Harrow tore it in half. The shuttle glided through the wreckage in silence, flames and debris spinning in the void around them like confetti after war. No one said a word. Back aboard the Harrow, the debriefing was short. Fleet Command didn't respond right away, not publicly. The reports were filed, the evidence uploaded, the names of the rescued logged. But Dren knew how this game worked. They would stall, they would investigate, they would wring their hands, because if they accepted what had happened, they would have to accept what came next. Humanity wasn't the species begging for a seat at the intergalactic table anymore. It was the species that flipped the damn table over and made everyone else pick up the pieces. Cray stepped into Dren's quarters later that night. He didn't salute, just looked at him, tired and wired all at once. "We made a list," he said quietly. "Of all the humans they had in those pods, 83 names, 22 missing military personnel, 32 civilians. The rest, unregistered, people no one even knew were gone." Dren leaned forward. "You want to ask if it was worth it?" Cray shook his head. "No, sir. I wanted to ask when we're going back." Dren smiled, for the first time in days. "We don't go back," he said. "We go forward, because this wasn't the only black site. You and I both know that." Cray nodded. Dren stood, pulled on his coat, and looked out the viewport into the endless black. "Let's make this simple, Cray," he said. "Sir, we don't send messages anymore. We don't beg for answers. From now on, we show up." The stars ahead of the Harrow didn't twinkle. They pulsed, like dying signals blinking through the black. Dren Hale stood alone on the bridge, the rest of the crew giving him space not out of respect, but understanding. A silence had settled among them, not the unsure kind, not the waiting kind. The silence of decision. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. This was war. The Galactic Order hadn't sent a message, not even a vague condemnation. No protests about trespassing into foreign zones, no reprimands about destroying the alien base. That told Dren everything. They knew, and they were watching to see what humans would do next. Hours later, Cray entered the commander's quarters again, but this time he carried a tablet instead of a question. Surveillance sweeps from the outer sectors came back. "You were right," he said without preamble. "There's more sites, not as big as the one in the belt, but they're out there, spread wide, hidden deep. They've been running this operation across 3 sectors, quietly, efficiently." Dren took the tablet, scrolled through images. Faint energy signatures, buried structures, all running cold. He set the device down. "Any of our people in them?" "Can't say for sure, but odds are high." Dren didn't blink. "We burn every one of them." Cray didn't flinch. "I'll prep strike routes." They understood each other now with fewer words, That was how war worked. The pleasantries died early. Before Cray turned to leave, he hesitated. Fleet Command won't stay silent forever. When they do respond, they won't like what we're doing. Dren's voice was ice. Then they should have done it first. The first black site on the list was deeper in uncharted territory, just inside a dead nebula that blocked most long-range sensors. The Harrow dropped into real space without a whisper, its weapons already primed, stealth active. This time, there were no warnings, no recon teams, no back and forth. The moment the alien base appeared on scans, Dren gave the order. Full bombardment, no retrieval. Cray blinked. No retrieval. They weren't holding prisoners, Dren said, eyes fixed on the display. They were building models, biologics, splicing tissue, trying to grow versions of us they could control. They weren't experimenting anymore. They were creating. We're not saving victims here. We're erasing blueprints. The Harrow did what it was built to do. 17 minutes later, there was no base, just dust and plasma. The second site didn't even resist. It powered down its own systems the moment they arrived, hoping surrender would earn mercy. It didn't. Mercy's a luxury we ran out of, Dren said, before they opened us up and fed our minds to their machines. The third site wasn't a lab. It was a hub. When the Harrow approached, Dren didn't see cages or test beds. He saw something worse, rows of glowing alien vessels, docked and pulsing with charged light. And inside those ships, humans. Or what was left of them. Dozens, maybe hundreds, cloned, wired, minds hollowed out, fed into alien software like sacrificial code. One of the Marines vomited in his helmet. Another simply stared, stunned, muttering prayers to a god who had stopped listening long ago. Dren gave the order. Kill it all! That night, after the last charge detonated, and the nebula swallowed the wreckage, Vel approached Dren in the observation deck. Her voice was quiet. How many more? Dren stared at the smoke trails still visible in the void. As many as it takes. And when they finally fight back? Dren looked at her, expression unreadable. Then they'll understand the one truth they've never accepted. She raised an eyebrow. That humans don't fight to win. He said, we fight to end things. The final transmission from Fleet Command came in a week later, not from a diplomat, not from a general, but from a council envoy. The message was brief, clean, controlled. Commander Dren Hale, your unauthorized engagements across sovereign territories have been recorded. Cease further aggression immediately. The Galactic Council seeks resolution, open dialogue, a peaceful path forward. Dren played the message twice, then deleted it. He walked onto the bridge, stood at the front of his crew, scarred, tired, but unbroken. They want peace now, he said, voice low, because they're afraid of what we've already done with one ship, one crew, no approval, no backup. He turned to Cray. How long until we reach the next target? 3 days, maybe less if we push drive capacity. Dren nodded once. Push it. Vel turned in her chair. And if the council gets in our way? Dren didn't even blink. Then we remind them. He looked out into the void, stars blinking like prey in the dark. Remind them why the worst mistake they ever made was trying to understand the human mind. And behind him, the Harrow surged forward. No longer a ship, a warning,